So, guys, last night another kind of brutal way to lose. National Predators looked like they were indeed the value side at plus 140 underdog or whatever it was. I think it was actually plus 140, even though I said plus 136. Either way, I liked it. They were in that game. They were winning the game fairly deep into the game. Wound up losing on a pretty late goal, and then the final score looked worse than it actually was, so they gave him an empty net with like 2 seconds left in the game. And if you were on the puck line, that's a really brutal way to lose that game. It's one of the most brutal beats that you can take in hockey when you have a plus 1.5 puck line dog and they give up the empty net right at the end to not even cover when they were covering the entire game. That's really brutal. But I was on the money line, still hurt. I didn't like that. Let's look at what's going on tonight. There are two more of these college football games in whatever conference this is. I don't even know what it is. I don't know if it's CUSA or, I think that's what it is. I don't even know. UTEP Florida International. I can tell you Florida International looks like they flipped from a 2-point dog to a 2.5-point favorite. I don't know exactly why, other than that UTEP has been pretty bad all year. No real comment on that. Sam Houston State, New Mexico State is a little bit interesting, as New Mexico State looks like they've plummeted from a 6-point favorite to 3.5. Not entirely sure why that would be the case either, since I actually kind of lean that way. There are a couple of things going on there. I think people are going to look at New Mexico State, or Sam Houston State, and the fact that they played Liberty as a 21-point dog. They were in that game. They played Liberty close last week, and I think they lost by like 4 or something. So that's going to make people think that Sam Houston State is competitive and think that this line is big. Whereas New Mexico State, when they played Liberty, they lost by a bit more, even though it was on the road. So I think people might do that like syllogism thing and think that means that Sam Houston State has value here because they played Liberty better. But I think they're in a bad spot, kind of a hangover spot after how they played Liberty. If you are a huge dog like that and you have a close game like that, sometimes it hangs you over into the second game. You have that hangover effect in the next game, and it can affect you. Sam Houston State has played like a fairly difficult schedule, though. They played Houston, BYU. These teams are big names, but they are down. So I don't know. Maybe I'm really talking myself off of Sam Houston State there. New Mexico State, they did have, as I mentioned in one of the previous videos, they had a tough stretch with 3 straight road games that took them to Hawaii, and then once they faced Liberty during that, and once they came home, they finally won a game pretty easily. So I don't know. I lean New Mexico State there, though. I think mostly it comes down to Sam Houston being in like a hangover spot there. Not that strong at all, but that's the way I would look there. In the National Hockey League of some more games going today. It's day 2 of the NHL. I will just comment quickly. My Bruins, I actually lean the Bruins, and I was close to making a play on the Bruins, and it's because this is the one situation on the card where Chicago is the one team that played yesterday, and they have to play again tonight, and they won on the road in an upset at Pittsburgh, which is a pretty big upset. And Pittsburgh is like a perennially good team, pretty much. Chicago was at least a minus, I think Pittsburgh was at least a minus 200 favorite there. Chicago went in there and upset them, a big upset, and now they have to play back-to-back on the road. That's a tough spot. It's tough to maintain that level of effort 2 nights in a row like that. However, they are playing Boston, who was historically good in the regular season last year, so it's not like Chicago just wouldn't show up focused for a game against the Bruins either. And I think if you have that first game out of the way already, whereas the Bruins don't yet, yes, it's going to potentially make you tired, which I think is definitely a disadvantage for Chicago, and I think that is the biggest factor here. There is somewhat of a factor of you kind of build that momentum there, and you get those opening day nerves out of the way there, and now you can just continue it and play hockey there. So there's actually a slight advantage to be seen in that situation, even though I think overall it is still a disadvantage that they had to play like a max effort game last night, pulled off a big upset, and it's going to be tough to do that 2 nights in a row. I would lean to Boston there, but they're over a minus 300 money line favorite now. If I did it, I would probably lay the puck line, but even that's like minus 1.5 on the puck line is like minus 120. So I don't know. But I do lean to the Bruins there, and it's not just my Bruin bias. I think that I don't factor bias into this, like fandom and rooting and such. You can't do that if you want to like make money long term. But I think Chicago's in the worst spot because they're in that letdown situation and could be the more tired team coming off of that. I will have a play, however, in Major League Baseball, which is what I'm looking at here. All three series that are remaining, because Texas won their series yesterday. Congratulations to the Texas Rangers. I'm happy about it because I don't like the Orioles, so good riddance. Get rid of the rest of the AL East. They're all gone. Tampa, Toronto, Orioles, all gone. I'll celebrate that somewhat. So that series is over, but the other 3 series are all happening. You got Atlanta, Philadelphia. It's tough to really comment on this because it looks like Atlanta's starting pitcher is still undecided, even though I think that it would be Bryce Elder's turn in the rotation to go. And he's a pitcher who's definitely been good on the year, although I think he has a little bit of lack of experience in big game situations, and his stats are a little bit indicative. Like his whip, I think, is a little bit indicative that it's not as good as that his ERA shouldn't be quite as good as what it is, although he is a good starter. And Aaron Nola is definitely decided as the pitcher for the Phillies here. This is a series that's tied 1-1. Don't have that much to comment on here, really. That's just what the matchup is. Nola has like a 250 OBA against Atlanta. Take from that what you will. I don't know. I don't have a lean really in any direction in that game. Don't know what to say. And then Dodgers, Arizona are playing the late night game. That's a series where the Dodgers are somehow actually on the ropes, losing 2 games in LA as a 100-win team. And it happened to Baltimore as well. And now the Dodgers go on the road down 2-0, facing elimination, and they have Lance Lynn on the mound. That is not a good situation for the Dodgers, man. Lance Lynn, not a very good pitcher. His stats are bad whip, puts way too many people on base, but Arizona has fought pitching, and he's a rookie. He doesn't have that playoff experience, and he has bad stats as well. He puts way too many people on base, and he was not very good in his first playoff outing. Even though he does have a playoff outing this year under his belt now, whereas Lance Lynn does not. But it's really tough to make a call in this game as well. Both of these pitchers are awful, so I don't really know. I don't know what to even say about this one either. And you could get a situation which is where I might talk about that in a second, where the team that's facing elimination, even though you didn't really see it with Baltimore, they just got crushed yesterday, and I thought they would lose to Texas, but teams, Major League Baseball, when they're facing elimination, you can see the teams start pulling out like all the stops and like maybe like using some of their starters in relief and just like going all out to try to like win that game and stay alive. And you might see that being the case with the Dodgers. Who knows? Like you get a little bit of like desperation mode there. Speaking of desperation mode, what I am going to do though is I actually like the Minnesota Twins. I've said it every game in the series that I lean to the Twins, and they're 1-2 in the series. Although I think they should have won the game that I lost the bet on in game 2. So let's not talk about that. I like how this matchup lines up for the Twins actually quite a bit here. This is their final home game, and they are now facing elimination here. But the matchup is Urquidy or Urquidy for Houston against Joe Ryan for Minnesota. And this is a matchup of like the back end of the rotation for both teams. But Urquidy is definitely the worst pitcher in Houston's rotation. He's bad. His stats are really bad. He's got an ERA north of 5, a whip over the 1.4s. He hasn't pitched yet in the playoffs this year. So I think all of that is a disadvantage. And versus the Minnesota Twins, even though it's only in 34 at-bats, 324 opponent batting average. So he has struggled against them. They have hit him well. I think all of that is a disadvantage for him. Whereas you got Joe Ryan, who I believe has made one. Or no, he hasn't actually. No, never mind. I scratched that. Neither of them have made a playoff start this year. So there's no advantage to be had there with neither pitcher having started yet in the playoffs. Forget about that, but I think Ryan has all the other advantages here. He's got an ERA that doesn't look good in the 4.5s, so that just makes him look like he's not very good, but his whip is south of 1.2. It's 1.17, so I think that means he's gotten a bit unlucky this season. He's pitched pretty well, and versus Houston's offense, even though it is good, versus their hitters in 53 at-bats, 208 opponent batting average, which is almost 100. It's about 100 points better than what Urquidy is putting up against the Twins, even though the Twins have the lesser offense. There's a big discrepancy there between how well they've pitched historically against these opposing hitters. Ryan, I think, has a big advantage there. So I like that. And in the bullpens, if you look at what happened in the previous game, well, Minnesota got crushed 9-1. So I think that's going to maybe give them a little bit more value as well, because they really got beaten down in that game. Didn't look good at all. And Gray did not have a good outing in that game. But what Minnesota did is they actually used 2 of their starters in relief in that one to try to carry the series forward, basically, and chew up innings. They used Maeda again, which that's kind of been his role as kind of their 5th starter or whatever in the playoffs. They've used him as an innings eater in these playoff games, which saves their bullpen. They used him, but they also used Bailey Ober, who was the pitcher in game 1, I think the starting pitcher in game 1 of this series, and he's one of their better starters, and they used him in relief to save some of those innings. And he's a pretty good pitcher. You don't really want to have him out of the rotation, but I think this reminds me of what the Red Sox did in the 2004 ALCS against the Yankees in that game where they got crushed to fall down 3-0. They lost 19-8. Tim Wakefield was supposed to pitch the next game. R.I.P. Tim Wakefield. Love that guy. I think he was a great dude, great knuckleball pitcher. Tim Wakefield decided to push off his start and say, all right, well, I'm not going to take my start in the next game now. I'm going to come in and save some of the bullpen here and eat up some of these innings in this blowout loss to save the rest of the bullpen. And even though the Red Sox were down 3-0 at that point, facing elimination, and Minnesota's now facing elimination here, what that tells me is that team still has motivation, and they're still saying, we're not done yet. We are going to have our starters say, we're going to save the bullpen. We know we're playing another game here. We're going to push this off, and we're going to hope that our bullpen is ready for this next game. We're not out of it yet. We're going to try to play in this next game. We're going to have our bullpen ready for this next game. It tells me that this team is not quitting, which is important. So I like that aspect of this. And if you look at the market here for Minnesota, they just kind of like with some of the other games in this series. So this is even more of a discrepancy here. What you see here is I see 76% of the tickets and 71% of the cash on Houston. So Houston is the public team. Everybody knows they're the better team. But in this matchup, I don't think that they're necessarily better. As I pointed out, Ryan is the much better starter over Urquidy. But here, this tells me that more of the bigger bets are going against the public, and they are on Minnesota here. And I think the line has moved up a little bit on Minnesota, and I actually had to lay minus 125. I wouldn't want to lay that much more than that with a team that's literally in a must-win, and you have them as a favorite. You're starting to not have the value anymore there, but I think you do still have value here because of the perception, because Houston is the better team, but in this situation, they aren't really. I think Minnesota should be a little bit heavier of a favorite here. So those are my thoughts on all of what's going on today here. Minnesota is the play. The Minnesota Twins minus 125 on the money line there. That's going to do it. I like it. I think there's some reverse line movement there, going against where the higher percentage of tickets and maybe the higher percentage of money has been. I think the bigger money, that's definitely telling you it's on the Twins there. Minnesota Twins minus 125. Peace out.